As I said, my name is Carl. Today we want to talk about hyper-casual games. Obviously, Voodoo has given a presentation before already, and sort of this is the theme these days. In general, the reason why this is interesting, if you look at the charts in the app stores now versus 18 months ago, things are very different. Over the last year and a half, we've learned that hyper-casual games have proven to be viable business models. Huge companies have evolved from hyper-casual games, from building hyper-casual games, from publishing hyper-casual games. And that's sort of generally what we want to talk about. We want to try to find out what makes hyper-casual games, what is a hyper-casual game, where do we see this industry going, what can happen in the future, and sort of what maybe the sauce is to making a great hyper-casual game. So without further ado, I kind of want to start just fundamentally, as this term gets thrown around so much. Hyper-casual games, everybody talks about it, everybody wants to get into it. For all panelists here, what for you is actually a hyper-casual game? How would you define a hyper-casual game? Eren?
Sure. Internally, we've always said hyper-casual is a type of game where tutorial is not mandatory. So it's the type of game where it's very easy to pick up, but could be hard to master. So it's more for us, I mean, it can have a different meaning for others, but for us it has been those type of games that appeal to many people rather than a niche subsegment of the population.
For us in TabTale, I think we try to define the borders of what is hyper-casual game, but it's every rule we set has his exceptions. I mean, one thing, it should be very easy, like easy mechanics, something very, very basic for the user. It doesn't have to be level-based, just short runs. But everything we do, every time we look at a new game, we found some new, some exceptions to the borders where we set it in.
Yes, I think you can also describe ultra-casual game by opposition to other type of game. And mainly it's in the way you consume ultra-casual game is very much different than the way you would consume a AAA game or even a casual game. Those ultra-casual games are very snackable, so basically you consume them the way you would consume a Mars bar. It takes you 2 minutes, you can do that everywhere, every time, and it's totally effortless. When you want to play God of War, the duration of session would be at least 20 minutes, maybe 1 hour. You know, it's really much different the way you do it. An ultra-casual game would be consumed really in just 2 minutes everywhere in the subway, waiting for your date or stuff like that.
So I think what's fascinating about hyper-casual games is ultimately it's way too broad of a category, and everybody here, all three of you, have proven different types of hyper-casual games. I think if you look at sort of Graham Games here, for me, one of the pioneers actually of hyper-casual gaming with their game 1010, proving to be the first mainly ad-driven business model around a title. What do you think makes it so successful, or has made 1010 so successful?
Yeah, I mean, within 1010, I mean, when actually it ties to the no tutorial story, right? So when Graham was first developing 1010, I think the team size was around 4 people or 5 people, and they were looking for a game that they could produce that did not require a tutorial. So then they were saying whatever complications, like there shouldn't be any words, there shouldn't be any numbers. It should be with shapes, and it should be about maybe the whole concept about tidying up and creating a mess. So that actually is like a living and breathing game in a way, that you first create a mess and then you tidy it up. But you do all of this without requiring words or numbers or anything complex. But it's not too easy either. It reminds you of past games, like Tetris, classic games, but it's also very different in the sense that you're never stressed for time. You're never, you can pretty much take your time thinking about how to design your board, how to make it less messy. So stuff like that are the core drivers, we believe.
Yeah, I think so. Simplicity is obviously key. No numbers, that's really important. We see a lot of puzzle games that add a lot of numbers and make things a lot more inaccessible.
Yeah, actually, 1010 is one of the most perfect ultra-casual game you can find, you know. And also one of the key of the success of 1010, I think, is the YouTube ability. We could call that at Voodoo. It's basically when you watch a video of 1010, you immediately understand what you have to do, how you can win, how you can lose. And that helps a lot to decrease, I think, the cost of acquisition because people know what they will get. And obviously, if what you show them is what they want, you succeed. So yeah, I remember the first time I downloaded 1010, it was really crystal clear. It was just before a train travel, and yeah, I enjoyed my time there.
One thing I want to add is that we had like different conclusions from something similar. We tested 2 different apps. Their mechanics were the same, the graphic was the same. It just was one with numbers, one without. And retention and CPIs went in favor of the one with the numbers. So we saw a different conclusion to the number thing.
Interesting. So with numbers work better than without numbers?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Also in scalability. Wow. Yeah, don't take my word for it then. Nice. I think sort of in general, sort of for you guys, as tying into what we just said, are there any basic rules you guys follow? I would have said a rule is no numbers, but I was just proven wrong. But like for you know, Hugo, do you guys have any basic rules you give your developers? Some simple fundamental guidelines that you want them to follow?
Yes, we have. The first one I already told you is the snackability. It's really important that your game, the game sessions are short, and that yeah, you consume your game like a snack. The second one is the YouTube ability. I just told you already about that. The third one would be that the game is System 1, which is basically very, very easy to understand and doesn't require your brain to work too much when you play. It means that having a game that is really, really simple and effortless, I would say. Another one is to be really forgiving. You don't want to be too deceptive with the player because it's linked to the snackability, you know. They don't want to make any effort to get the reward. It's really important to be really focused on only giving a reward. This is why also we implement perfect and other features that really reward the player for good action. And the last one would be to be gameplay first. So really focus on the core gameplay and don't go too much into metagame features or really don't go deep into the game. This is really just for mid-core. It's only a percentage of the population that are interested to develop their own village or stuff like that. Most of the people, and the reason of the success of ultra-casual gaming is because we just focus on the core gameplay. Anyone here who played Splashy would understood that.
Would you say that you ever that you have like a time limit of how much time you spend on a game before you decide to kill it? So let's say a core concept is presented to you, you play it and you test it and you see it has potential, but you don't release it yet. Do you guys sort of in that prototyping, do you guys say, okay, look, if we've spent 30 days on it, screw it, we're going to kill it?
Yes, the trap is to do too much iteration and to really believe too much into a gameplay. Actually, people are really smart when they watch an ad or they watch a game. They immediately know if it will be rewarding, if they find it fun, you know. You can, a good example is that we tried to copycat 1010 maybe 1,000,000 times, and in any way different, with different design, different level design, everything, and it simply didn't work because 1010 was already the perfect gameplay, the perfect architecture already.
And you guys at Grandma have like a deep prototyping culture, I think.
Yeah, so in hyper-casual, you need numbers in terms of trial and error. Like there are various ways of maximizing that number. You could, like in a publishing model, you could work with different number of studios to increase that number. In our case, we haven't done publishing so far, so we have always developed our own games. And the way we did it was to have an internal prototyping method, which was rapid, but also very short, in very short bursts. So we spent Fridays every week to do this. 1010 was developed in 12 hours, for example, the first prototype, which did well. And so we believe in it. We'd rather try something else within the next 12 hours than to iterate on the first one in hyper-casual, not in the other games we do. But that has proved to be better, like than adding a different feature and optimizing the 3%, 4%. So simplicity and a high number of prototypes, trial and error is crucial.
For us, I think we first go to a soft launch, and even if we believe or don't believe this game is going to be the greatest hit, we wanna look at the numbers first. And when you go to soft launch with hyper casual, you have basically two criteria you look at, which is first the retention and then the CPI that you eventually have to pay to acquire a user. And if none of them work, if both factors are bad, then we just drop it. But if at least one looks really promising, then we will do everything we can. We start to believe in this product, in this game, and do everything we can to make it work, and then go to a second soft launch and a third soft launch until we're absolutely sure we can make it a hit or we can't.
And this is for your own games as well as published games?
Of course.
In general, just diving into sort of prototyping at home, building your own games versus publishing, you know, and all you guys, so Voodoo and TabTale have both. For you in the prototyping and Gram, you just have sort of, do you have a day where you just say, okay, now everybody gets some time to prototype, come up with new concepts, game developers are encouraged to try new stuff? So
yeah, I mean, that's what we do, and we spend Fridays to either work on a different prototype or learn something that they didn't know before. Like it could be VR, making a game in VR and try that, right? Like it doesn't have to end up as a game, but it should be something that creates a discontinuity from the regular ways they do work, right? And it's also a business model discussion. So we don't do publishing because it's a margin thing as well. Like we'd rather publish less number of games per month with higher margins, but that's a different model. It doesn't mean that this is right, which I think, as Alex mentioned, Voodoo does 5 games a month. So I'm sure you take a different view on it, which works differently.
In terms of prototyping, if that's the question, and the process, we don't want to tell the studio what to do. We really love working with them, and they are really creative, so we just give them high guidance about what they do. But I mean, if we were asking them to respect a certain process, I think it would kill their creativity. So we simply stick to high guidance. If we see that they are losing time, we tell them. If we see that they are in the opposite, taking a lot of time, but being really creative and going, finding new trends, etc., we encourage them in that direction. Yeah, that's it.
So you mentioned there's like sort of, we're talking like a little more, giving games a little more depth and so on. So, for example, a game like Baseball Boy has a lot more depth than maybe Snake versus Blocks has in your case. Once a game is published with you guys, do you spend a lot of time improving the games, evolving the games as it's live in the store already?
Yes, always. We launch them quite fast, but then we keep on moving and improving them continuously. And also, we do basically what we call game lifting, because we are learning so much over every month. So some games are a little bit late and don't have the last features. For example, the haptic vibration on iPhone, which is really, really good and efficient, was not on Flappy Dunk. So we did a little lifting on Flappy Dunk recently, and now I got all the new features.
So beyond sort of what hyper-casual games are, have you been seeing an evolution in hyper-casual games in general? Have you seen a change as these games evolve? Or these highly snackable games change over time? Eren?
So recently we've seen, at least in the industry, some other games that do well as idle games. So they're not as hyper-casual as the other hyper-casual we discussed, because there's a sense of progression, you have characters that you upgrade, you have a camp of some sort. But that's been our latest focus as well. Longer lifetime games. So based on going back to the margin discussion I was mentioning. But hyper-casual overall, especially if you now look at the charts, I think simplicity will always prevail, and those different types of games will find ways to coexist. Even you see the most complicated games like PUBG, Fortnite getting launched at the same time, while the charts are being dominated by very simple games, graphically and complexity-wise. So mobile is growing. That's why coexistence will be there.
Yeah, I think the market is rhythm by trends. So we see trends coming up. Like I think on the trimester, every 3 months we see a new trend. The actual trend, the current trend is very funny. It's coming from super topics, and it's the drawing games. You know, game when you are drawing stuff. I think it's very also appealing to women, and it's very feminine. So it's also interesting when most of the ultra casual games are targeting, I think, men. And the second answer to the question would be the evolution on a more long term of the ultra casual. And what we observed at Voodoo is that basically it's following at a very high pace the history of video game. Basically, video games started with Pong, which was flat design and very basic design, basic mechanic. For us, it was Snake versus Block. And now we are more going into games like Twisty Road, Baseball Boy, which are in 3D with more depth, a little bit more detail in the graphic. So yeah, we are following the video game history at a very high speed. So it's quite interesting. The only question is that we don't really know what was after the 3D, you know, in the game. We'll see.
I think that originally, of course, everyone tried to make the hyper-casual very simple mechanics, simple animations, simple everything. But I think that after the honeymoon phase, where you get a lot of installs on a very cheap prices, it's getting harder and harder to acquire more. And then you need to think, okay, what's next? What I'm going to do next? And then some solution might be adding content to the game, and that's what we did with Run Sausage Run, our #1 hit. We launched it with very basic characters and simple mechanics, and then we felt like, and we got also the feedback from the players that they want more. So we launched many new skins, new type of sausages that you can run with. We shifted the run from the kitchen to the garden. We had many content updates that made the app more interesting to those who will definitely love it, but if it stays the same for a long time, then their lifetime value or the lifetime phase of their usage will be very short.
Was Run Sausage Run a bit of a sort of a luck find? Was it sort of a quick idea that you guys launched, and then there was, damn, this works well, and now let's add content later?
Well, yeah, we have our own super casual, hyper casual studio, and they try many prototypes, and this one was one of our game designers came up with this idea. He made the prototype. Initially, the comments in the room weren't that supportive of this game. Like, people in the company didn't like it so much, but we gave it a shot. Like, we gave every new prototype a shot, and once it was a huge success in the soft launch phase, we all
was it with sausage from the very beginning, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the main idea to use a sausage was that at the time there was a really cool and trendy lens on Snapchat using a sausage, and we thought it might be cool to use this kind of character. Yeah.
I thought it was from Sausage Party. But,
yeah, that was, I think, a year later.
Yeah, that's true.
But actually, one thing that is really interesting about Run Sausage Run is that after a while, you know, a lot of ultra casual games were really abstract design, and I think people got bored about it, seeing just circle and polygon fighting each other. So what they were eager to was having a small story told to them, and I think Run Sausage Run buzz and success was partly because it was giving that to the most of the user. You know, you tell a small story, even if it's just a sausage, you know, avoiding obstacle on the kitchen. At least it was something more than just polygon and abstract design.
Yeah, it had like a lot of creativity to it, and it's sort of humor.
Yeah.
I think humor is something that always generally works. Other companies
Emotion.
like Playgenary and so on have proven that humor works really well, and humor is a form of creativity. That's sort of how you define yourself, I think, as a content creator. Yes, yeah, I think like for everybody in general, like if you look at 1010, if you look at Sausage Party, if you look at games like Helix Jump and Snake vs. Block, all of them draw on existing concepts. Sort of, Sausage Party, Sausage Run essentially is a 2D runner, but with many layers added to it, and 1010 is a puzzle game essentially, but obviously a lot of simple hyper casual concepts added to it. Nice. I think in this evolution for you guys, do you see, so you mentioned that you want to follow the video games trend, for example, that you see sort of how video games evolved over the last 10 years, that this is something where that we can probably observe in mobile, probably at a greater speed. You mentioned idle games, or sort of adding idle layers to games. Are you guys starting to like combine these different concepts, sort of adding, you guys started adding idle concepts to your games as well, I've noticed?
In terms of the future of ultra casual, first of all, I don't see it disappearing tomorrow. As we say, it's really now in the day-to-day life of everyone. It's not consumed like mid-core games, so it's really as its place on the market right now. After that, how it will evolve, my opinion, and it's a very personal one, would be that it will follow cycle. It will be a cyclic model, and hopefully after the 3D and very figurative, people would go back to more something that would be abstract again and again. I don't see the market going into VR or AR or something like that. It's too complicated. It won't be snackable at all. And I don't see also HD graphic, AAA type of game fitting the ultra casual game. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see that coming. Don't you?
Does any one of you guys actually think there's a reason for why this trend started in the last 18 months? Sort of, what has anything changed over the last 18 months that suddenly these models became viable? Or was it just the invention of 1010? Changed everything.
I think this kind of games were always there, and if you remember when mobile gaming first started, we had games like Fruit Ninja and Flappy Bird were they can fit easily into the hyper casual, and I think it's kind of a circle, like Hugo said. It's start with the very simple games, and then people want some more, and then came the mid-core games and the hardcore games, and then we went back to hyper casual games because people are like. The market is flooded with the same ideas all the time. Like strategy games there were enough at that time of point, and people want something more simple. And then hyper casual fit into this position. But when I don't know, maybe 6 months from now, maybe 2 years from now, hyper casual will be also very popular than people can handle, or they want to handle, and they want something more sophisticated, and then the circle will continue.
I think the thing about 1010 being the first hyper-casual game is that there were hyper-casual games before 1010, but 1010 was the first one utilizing paid user acquisition. So the games prior to 1010 relied mostly on virality or featuring or other types of stuff that was not under their control. Whereas in 1010, we realized that we could actually show ads to users to come to our games, and in our games, we also showed ads to monetize. And there was actually a margin for that to be profitable and be bootstrapped enough so that we could scale and work on other games and grow our office and make other games that are more engaging for the players. I think once that was there, then other games also have entered into that area. Other companies have started doing the same, and that enabled them to scale further. I think that's mainly it.
Very quickly, I think it was just before nobody knew that it was possible to make money with that type of game. Simple as that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. I think there's also an element of these games offered new types of creativity. New. If you look at most strategy games, we're all very, very similar. Most match 3 games are incredibly similar, and there's a huge amount of user fatigue that came with that as well. And sort of
Actually, it's beautiful, you know? It seems very simple, those type of games, but me, I find it really beautiful because it's a little bit like music. You have notes, a limited amount of notes, and with that you can create an unlimited, almost infinite amount of songs. And it's a little bit the same with the ultra-casual gaming. You have always the basic mechanic. I think you've noticed there are balls in maybe 90% of those. But you can create more and more, an infinite number of concepts, and I'm always amazed to see the creativity of all the studios to create every time new games, new concept.
And all games are fundamentally different again. You know, Helix Jump and Sausage Run are very, very, very different games. Yeah. But they both rely on tapping, essentially. They both rely on tapping the screen, basically.
Yeah.
That's correct. Do you guys think for other content creators out there, maybe even beyond just the gaming space, or maybe beyond the mobile space at least, there are certain lessons they can draw from hyper-casual development? Like sort of from what you guys are doing, this is sort of how, I generally believe, for example, just to give you some context, that the entertainment industry as such can learn a lot from mobile game developers. You know, when the advent of performance marketing for games is groundbreaking compared to what traditional AAA advertising would be for games and so on. But would you say, Eren, that there's any normal other content creators can learn from what you guys do?
I think it's the main thing is the 80-20 principle that is very prevalent in mobile gaming and especially more in hyper-casual. Very shortly, you could do 80%. You could get 80% of the result and 20% of the time invested. So you don't have to go overboard in graphics, overboard in the sounds, music, and make it like a AAA type of a mobile game in hyper-casual to understand if it's going to be go or no-go. That would really save a lot of upfront time, and now you could only invest in parts where it's very relevant. Like you could only invest in graphics if it really relates to feedback to the player, right? Like you wouldn't do like an unnecessary graphical investment. So things like that are generally, it would be great, for example, if you could do this in the movies, hypothetically, right? You can't because you don't know if a movie is going to do well or not before releasing it. But if it would be great if they could do a soft launch with like only a few characters there. Would this be interesting? Oh no, you know. It's hard to draw conclusions, but I think that's our biggest luxury because the platforms we use enable us to do that. Like we could open subsegments and pick like 10,000 people, see what happens, and decide to go or no go. And that's why with a small number of people, we could get to scale with trial and error. I think that's the biggest advantage.
I think that if you want to be a movie director, then you don't start with doing a Hollywood movie. You start with making video clips, and then you learn and you move forward. The same with game development. There are developers out there that are investing 2 years of their life working on the most perfect game, and they waste a lot of money, a lot of time, and eventually they have no guarantees it will work, and they don't know it yet. I think that for indie developers, for small developers, the best lessons you can get are from hyper-casual games. Start making them. It's relatively cheap. It's relatively short time to build it, and you learn so much about retention, about monetization, about what attracts people. Eventually, when you develop 3, 4, 5 hyper-casual games, I think you're ready to maybe do bigger things than that. But to start with, like in the show business industry, you need to start from simple things, and then if you want to grow.
Totally agree with you guys. I think hyper-casual gaming is a very good school for pragmatism and into the business and launching. How to learn to launch a business. I think it was one of the best schools.
I think just want to double down on what Eren just said. Graphical investment. How important is that for you guys for the prototyping? Hugo?
I think it's pretty obvious. It's not that much. It's Pareto law, you know. You just do the 20% that would do the 80% of effect. That's it.
Do you guys ever improve on the graphics later on? Like, so
we tried. When we launched Flappy Dunk, we were just horrified by the look of the game. We thought that we need to change that. We did a lot of A/B tests, a lot of different design. The one I preferred was the one with the rust KPIs. So finally, we stick with the cute ball with wings. Yeah, sometimes I mean, beauty is a very subjective concept, and data will show you that a lot.
So for you guys at Gram Games, sort of graphical investment after you release, for example, if I look at Merge Dragons versus other Dragon games, Merge Dragons might come across as a little less polished than others. However, clearly it's working very well.
So those are some of the learnings we took from hyper casual and applied in our casual portfolio. So Merge Dragons is, we consider it more casual or even mid-core because you have a camp, you have levels, it's a saga, and there are no ads yet. But the whole graphical investment there compared to maybe other games that are in the top grossing is less because we cared about making dragons cuter, for example, because dragons are relevant. We cared about making buildings different from each other when you level them up, but we cared less about, for example, the sides, the sky, the clouds, and all of that would make the game more intensive. I think it's graphical investment would be more important in a game if you work with an IP, for example. Or in the previous talk, there was mention about CSR2. So like the whole immersive aspect about like a car and being in it. So there, it's going to be very crucial. Like you need to convey that feeling of being in that car 100%. Otherwise, it's not going to work. But that's a niche subsegment, subsegment of the population that's very interested in that particular car. Whereas none of us have seen real dragons. So as long as that's like it conveys that general feeling, we are fine to stop there on our side.
For you guys at TabTale, is graphical investment very important?
It depends. I mean, we do invest a lot on graphic, and we have amazing graphic designers who work on many of our titles. We do want to polish the game to look very beautiful. However, not to all games. Like we have games that we have kind of like Voodoo style, very no, and the graphic way it looks. I mean, not very simple, very abstract. Not a running sausage in a kitchen. We're not copying your games.
Everybody knows they're not pretty.
So we do have titles that we want to invest in graphic, and some titles that we don't. It's just like management decides.
I think like that kind of leads me to the next question as to sort of graphical investments is also a differentiator to potential copycats, for example, and that's something I wanted to touch on. Obviously, we all know in the mobile space everything gets copied really, really, really fast, and the moment a game hits the top 50, probably has 20 copycats out there already live. How do you guys combat copycats? Is sort of having deeper graphics important? Do you have other means to do it to differentiate yourself from identical games? Eren?
So our approach to that so far has been more ad hoc. I mean, we don't have like a team searching for it, but generally it gets pointed out to us by either our employees or sometimes our partners we work with. And generally, the way we try to differentiate is by two things. One is maybe not graphical investment, but by feedback. So even if the game doesn't look good, the feedback should be there. Like you should want to upgrade your people, upgrade your characters, right? Or when you place a block in 10-10 and the row disappears, that feedback should be very satisfying for the player. So those are the small things that you can differentiate. But I think secondly, because our business model relies on paid UA rather than virality, the scale you're at, the copycats come a bit later in the game. So they can't reach that scale. People also realize that, oh yeah, this just looks like this other game that these guys have developed before. So it's harder for them to take your place. I think it's not the copycats, but it's the people who sort of take your idea and do something else with it. Those can be real threats. They can be much more successful than you. But yeah, I mean, it's different. So we don't do anything against that.
Yeah, copycat, it's a little bit like rain. You just cannot avoid it. The only thing you can do is take an umbrella and try to avoids the drops. We don't really care about real copycat like Chinese. If copycat is rain, Chinese copycat is like really a storm. You know, you cannot fight against it. But sometimes, yeah, for the main one that are really that can attack a little bit the business. For example, on Helix Jump, we had a really big copycat that were for sure taking shares of the game. In that case, we lawsuit the company. Simple as that. Otherwise, for the type of game that you are the copy and improve, basically. Indeed, it's really hard to fight against those. The best way is to do that before the competition, basically. Flappy Dunk is in a way a copy and improve. It's very inspired from Up. It's the very similar gameplay from Ketchup, also from some other game in the store. But the difference is that it's very much different in terms of feeling. In terms of balancing, in the presentation of Alex and Gabri just earlier, we told that Paul, the creator of the game, spent 2 days tweaking the balancing of the game. So in the end, even if the concept is quite similar, the feeling when you play the game is very much different. And you see that in the retention, you see that also in the feeling, in the result of the game. So it's a concept that is quite sensitive in our market, the copycat.
For you guys?
I think users are getting a little bit more sophisticated. They already know who Voodoo is and who Ketchup and Gram Games and Crazy Labs, and they know who are the biggest players in this industry. So it helps. We don't really fight the copycats. I mean, on Google Play, if you search for Sausage Run, you'll see maybe 30 different games, but eventually the users know to look at reviews, to look at the number of downloads, to look at all the information you get in the stores, and while the other copycats don't have the resources to do an effective UA, as Eren said, they're left behind. And the other thing, I think if you talk about the big players, I don't think that copying is a bad thing. It's just moved this industry forward. It's not an exact copy. It's just inspiration of other games, and then you make something good better, and this is how this industry is moving forward.
It is also possible to merge gameplays. You can, for example, 1010 is a merge of a puzzle game with Tetris. So I think you can. It's not copycat. It's not a copy. It's really new creativity. Yeah.
And as you said, that's sort of the bigger threat, but also that's the great opportunity of the app stores. So you can merge simple concepts and create something new. That's awesome. So just as a final question, but like it's sort of rounding up what we've discussed. Do you think this is all here to stay? Obviously, do you think this concept as such is here to stay? Obviously, we hope so.
Yes, just yes.
As like sort of with like a general threat to the industry, so do you see anything that sort of could change this up over the near future?
Not really, no.
I think the fact it's so easy to develop those kind of games will make more and more people want to try to take a bite in it. But I think the future of this industry is by the big companies publishing small developers. I don't think that small developers publishing their own games will have a big future, because we all have our publishing teams and many other big gaming companies opening up their own, and I think this industry is going to big publishing game companies and not to the indies working independently in the App Store.
It's also, with the latest changes, the way discovery works in both App Store and Google Play Store, it becomes harder and harder for an indie studio to create a game that becomes viral. It still happens, but it's less possible. So there's going to be more consolidation. And I think one, especially for ad monetized games, regulation is a big threat, I think. So we'll need to see how that plays out going forward. It's still pretty new, but especially in Europe and US it's starting, and we need to see how that affects.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think as long as creativity continues, these games will be successful. There's so many more concepts that will come out from great studios, great indies, great teams. So yeah, I generally think it'll be a good time. Nice. Anyway, this was basically it from the main questions. Obviously, we want to open this up to any questions from the audience.
So in terms of hyper-casual games, because the UA part is important, as you guys mentioned, so what are like the average CPIs for Western markets, and where is your main audience in terms of those hyper-casual games?
Well, of course, it's different from game to game, but I think CPIs are nowhere near the CPIs we used to talk about in different
numbers.
Sorry?
Some numbers.
Without being too specific, I think 50 cents in US, iOS CPI is good. If you talk about it with, I don't know, Plarium, we're making strategy games, they will laugh at you. And I think the networks, the ad networks are not really matured for this thing because they're still talking in CPI terms yet and raise the bids and stuff like that. But I think eventually those games have a very good conversion rate, which makes the eCPMs higher. So the CPI is not really the factor. Eventually, you look at how much an ad network like AppLovin or others can make per the 1,000 impressions they give you.
Okay, and what's the like day one retention that you guys are aiming for or killing the game?
We kept it secret for a long time, but it's not secret anymore. I think we're looking for 55% day one minimum to launch a game. I see everyone write it down.
Okay, and like I understand, like retention is more important for you guys than monetization.
Yes, obviously, because it's linked. The more the user stay, the more you can monetize him.
Okay, and is long-term retention actually important, or?
What, sorry, can you repeat?
For those hyper-casual games, is for you guys like long-term retention important, or it's more the early one?
Yes, I mean, the retention, you can always compare it to the CPI. If you have a game that has really high CPI, then the long-term retention became important. The lower your CPI is, the less important your retention, your long-term retention becomes.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
It's more the convexity of the retention curve that's more important as the game becomes more casual rather than hyper-casual, because most hyper-casuals monetize in the first 3 to 5 days, make most of their LTVs. But as the game becomes more longer-term dependent, then you need to care about long-term investment. In an ad-monetized game, earlier levels of monetization are more important because it's the same users.
Yeah, and talking about monetization, how important are the AIPs? Are there anyhow important, or like 80% is from the ads and you just forget about the AIPs?
Yeah, there are various games that pick different strategies. In our case, in our ad monetized games, the ad is more than 90–95% of the game's revenue. So IAPs there are more. If you don't want to see ads, you buy a no ads package and stuff like that. Like in Bouncy or Merge Town is slightly higher, but on average, 90–95% is ads.
So how much ads per, I don't know, session per user do you guys serve on average?
Again, I mean, it depends from game to game, but if you like, I can give you a detailed dashboard, and then we can look through after the session.
Okay, so we'll catch up later on. Thanks.
Hey guys, Leonard from Clanplay here.
Hey.
Love your games. Know some of your companies very well. I was wondering about clan systems in hyper-casual games. I mean, specifically for Merge Dragons, clans would fit so well. You need a different dragon to pass a certain level, and then the collaboration makes sense, and then gives also value to a specific collection of certain level dragons. But it's applicable to any other game as well. So I was wondering about your perspective going forward in incorporating clan systems in your genre.
So I would think Merge Dragons would be more casual, because in hyper-casual you actually do, in most of the hyper-casual games we have, they're more high-score oriented, and you generally always start from scratch. So it's not like you don't start from a base that's already developed. There are various features that may or may not allow this, but yes, in Merge Dragons, I also think clans would work well, and we have a future roadmap that would add clans. Because it's more about collaboration, it's more about social. But I think that's different from what makes a hyper-casual game successful.
Would you see clans in Helix Jump, for example?
So I hold the stand that you can add clans to almost any game. With enough creativity, you can find a mutual goal and a collaborative effort. It was huge games that originally introduced clan systems into social casino, which previously was thought as a single-player mode games. And you can add meta, as we're seeing coming in so many game genres today. I'm sure clans would add a lot of engagement and dedication to players.
Interesting.
Hey guys, thanks for the presentation, very interesting. I wanted to do a simpler question. So some of you guys work with outside teams and all of you guys work with teams. I wanted to ask, besides passion and creativity, what are top traits that you look for, top 3 traits in teams?
Not to be stuck in beliefs and be really open-minded and be curious and eager to try and test everything. I guess
even though we haven't worked with an outside studio to publish a game that's successful, I think, building on what Hugo said, developers, designers, and artists are a bit like sculptors, right? And they tend to fall in love with whatever they're creating. But at the end of the day, especially a hyper-casual game, it's very numbers-driven, right? So you need to say no to certain things and say, stop, no, don't spend time here, spend more time there. So if they're stuck with a certain direction and it's hard to direct people, then it becomes harder and harder to end up at wherever you want to go.
Hi guys. In free-to-play, people quite often camp on the grossing score, on the grossing charts to see who's doing well. How do you observe the success of other people doing hyper-casual games? I mean, can you tell who's making money from just ad-driven revenue if you're looking at competitors? See whose strategy is working.
How you can tell who makes money? How do you compare yourself to the competition?
I think the app stores is a good indication. If you see an app that stays there for a long time in the top charts, it means that company probably doesn't throw millions of dollars to the garbage. If Helix Jump is in the top for a long time, I guess Voodoo is making money out of it.
We asked Carl. No, we don't. But we actually, it's not, the transparency there is pretty low. But what you can do is you need to have your own market insights drawn out, either by yourself or your team or someone. Top charts is a good place, and you need to understand how many ads they're serving and try to estimate. But then the question becomes, how many big games are out there anyways, right? It's not that many, so it's not like the IAP charts.
Any other questions?
Great. Actually, that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for the great presentation.
Thank you.